Thank you for those kind remarks. You know, coming late in the afternoon like this, I'm really just here to try and keep you awake before your dinner. I really want to talk about 5 areas that we've been working on. Just to illustrate what we see as the opportunities. These are things that we are already doing, as opposed to things we are planning to do. I won't talk about mobile money, because I think we've all done that by now. But I'm going to keep you awake, I'm just going to start by showing you a little clip on an area that I want to start with first.
When my husband passed away.
Thank you. You know, I was sharing with some people recently that if you look at the African population today, less than 25%, half our population are less than 25 years old. One of the major challenges that we face today is unemployment, despite the fact that we are seeing tremendous and encouraging results on economic growth. We have to begin to think, particularly with industries like ours, which are seen as very successful, but yet creating employment opportunities and empowerment. So we challenged our team to look at how they could redesign their distribution, to look at 3 challenges. One, we were putting up too many billboards. I mean, if you walk into an African city today, it's plastered with billboards from mobile network operators. So we said, look, is there a way you can reduce the number of billboards? Secondly, one of the major issues as penetration levels have been increasing is power for our subscribers to charge up their phones. We did a study on this and we found some really shocking outcomes about the number of the challenges that the poor have in actually getting their phones charged. Our efforts appeared to be keeping the network powered up, yet we forgot about the consumer. So our team designed a solar charging system. And we chose that we would go into the communities, because one of the symbols of growth in Africa is the informal sector. And the one thing you'll always see is the little tuck shop. So our strategy was go in, don't build new tuck shops. Select people with existing tuck shops and give them a new tuck shop, which is powered by solar, which is our billboard. So they have panels on them. So we no longer put up huge billboards. These became our billboards in the townships. Now here's an interesting figure. The tuck shop owners, in Zimbabwe, we have put in about 600 of these kiosks, as we call them. We call them green kiosks. The average income that the tuck shop owners had before we came in was about $50 a week. The average income now is just over $3,500. Some of our kiosks are generating $30,000 a week, and I'm talking US dollars. We don't talk about it too often because we don't want them to get robbed. But they have become cash-generating machines. They are very integrated into our distribution. We're no longer building stores. They're our stores. We bring them in, we train them as entrepreneurs, with only one condition, which is we want the majority to be women. because of we have a greater multiplier, and don't any man ask me why. But this is what we call our green kiosk. So they sell our products, they sell our products, but they continue to sell milk and sugar and everything else. And we train them as entrepreneurs. We have people who go out, teach them bookkeeping, and of course, one of the most interesting things that happened to our chairman recently is that he went to see the Speaker of Parliament, and as he was leaving, the House of Chiefs, who is the top chiefs, asked to see him, and he was quite taken aback. And he said, I'd like a green kiosk. And he thought he meant for his community, and man turned out to want it for himself. Thank you very much. Let me just move on to talk about our work on solar power. So if you look at the green kiosk, as we call it, that was at a community level. So we said, but we really want to get the customers to increase their charging of their phones. So we had our team redesign a normal solar lantern so that it would become a charger for our phones. Just a simple solar lantern redesigned as a cell phone charger. And I think, unfortunately, it's in a box here. I wanted to show you one. We are now selling more of these lanterns than we sell cell phones. And our studies show that ARPUs amongst the solar lantern users went up by 20%. Because again, if you think about it, as we reach these penetrations of 70% and beyond, whether you are in Kinshasa or Harare or Nairobi or Lagos, power is the big issue. But we are now addressing two issues there. We're providing lighting as well as the charging of the phones. Our most successful lantern is one that has two chargers for a cell phone, which I think when we come to look at data and analysis, that will tell you an interesting story. We have something on our solar products. So successful was our lantern, being the entrepreneur that I am, I call myself chief entrepreneur. So as I watched the developments around our solar lanterns, I realized we had a new business, in fact. So I called in one of our senior executives. I said, would you like to do something different? And Econet is the proverbial Hotel California. You can come in, but you can never leave. So this guy has been 16 years with me. I said, would you like to try something different? He said, please. So I asked him to move to Dubai and to go to China and to go and develop a range of solar products and start a new company focused just on supplying our own competitors and colleagues in the industry products for charging of cell phones. And I just wanted to show you some of the range.
The future is here. The future lantern solar way. I say future without kerosene.
One of our products that we've developed, which also includes a solar charging platform, is actually something we developed while we were bored in an airport one day, which is a solar-powered candle. But it always has a cell phone charger attached to it, as you have seen. So moving on but one of our major initiatives on solar was something we've been developing now for the last 2.5 years. And I know some of you may have seen it on television because people like Al Jazeera and CNN have been in to see it. and we're hoping to formally go live commercially in January, which is something we call the home power station. And in that concept, let me show you what this is the first time we have got the full product ready. So this is the home power station. And as you can see, it has 4 USB ports here. And it has a solar panel which charges some batteries that sit inside here. Now that in itself is not an invention. The real invention is here. Because in here we have a SIM card. And the SIM card links this to our prepaid platform. So what a customer does is they install this unit in a village home. It comes with some lights, and all the lights are wireless. That's the first time anybody's used that concept for this kind of thing, which is a wireless bulb, which has an embedded battery inside the light. And the reason was, originally we had cables. Somebody saw it 2 years ago, it had cables. But when we went to run tests on these in Lesotho, the high levels of lightning created problems in villages. So we had to go back to the drawing board and redesign the light. But the key to the SIM card is it connects to our prepaid platform. So a customer marries that SIM card to their own SIM card, which allows me to install this in my grandmother's village while deducting 5 cents a day from my telephone bill, my prepaid bill. And basically you have a utility service. So we call it the home power station because it's not only lighting, it charges cell phones. We have a small TV, we have a small radio, we have a whole range of accessories that they can now buy in a store. So using our cell phone platform, you're able to pick up $5, $6 of ARPU a month from those customers. But essentially you have shifted, you're able to meet the needs of the people that actually require this thing but can't afford it. But have a son or a grandson like me in the city who has a guilt trip because 5-10 cents for my grandmother a day, as opposed to the fact that I'm paying 5-10 cents to make a minute to make a phone call. So you work out the number. So it all revolves around deducting. And one of the key things we do is we cycle the deductions 3 times a day. And the reason is to solve another thing that we as cell phone operators know all too well, which is to stop people from moving to another network. Because if it comes to check to deduct the money that it needs and you're not there, your grandmother will call you. Okay, so this is some of the work we've been doing on the solar power area, both in terms of charging devices for our customers, as well as now beginning to create a whole new range of products. Our lantern now is selling into some 40 countries. And I'm pleased to say this morning we made a big shipment to the Philippines because this is now a very popular product. We even have a version of the lantern which is just for the military. And it costs a military price. Let us move on, George. The Army always has money. Health. We have two major initiatives on health, and I just wanted to break the thing for you with another little clip, this time on health. As most network engineers will tell you, in Africa, as you know, when we talk about power for the network itself, in fact, even the capital cities, to be honest, we drive these networks on diesel generators. Okay, we are beginning now to talk about using solar panels, but if we look at a network like Nigeria, with 2, sometimes even 3 generators running to drive one base station. And the irony is, although the cell phone industry became the biggest buyer of diesel generators, there are no diesel generators designed for cell phone networks. We keep buying the same generators that are out there. And what happens is they come in certain sizes. So you don't have 6.5 kVA or 6.9. They come in these sizes of 10, 15, 25. So some very clever young people did some studies at this, I think at Penn State University. And they said, what do you do with the excess power? There's always excess power on the generators. Why not use some of that power for a little fridge for vaccines? When I saw this study, I remembered a major crisis in Zimbabwe in 2007. There was a cholera outbreak. And UNICEF came to us and said, help us. And people were dying like flies to get vaccines and medicines into the rural areas. I mean, I looked at it and I said, let's do it. So that is the project we call Energize the Chain. And I know many of you have read about it, but we have implemented some 48 centers of this. And one of the most interesting things about it is the impact on the community. There's no theft of diesel anymore. One of our biggest expenses. The community will lynch anybody who goes anywhere near that place because it's life for children. This is something we all should be doing, because we are the only critical mission power that sits in rural areas. One guaranteed source of electrical power is that tower. And that little fridge, when we just hand over the fridge to the nearest clinic and we walk away. The key, they can come in, they can help us out, and we call that Energize the Chain. I've just been working with the team that developed this to now create a foundation. And really what we are calling on is operators. This is not about donors. The fridges, sometimes you can add a little truck so that you can get to the community. And I'll come back later on as to how I think these things should be funded. Our second initiative is one which we've just gone into pilot. We call it the Disease Surveillance Network. Again, I have to say, another group of Americans, and I'm not, out here to plug for the Americans, but there's some interesting things happen at those American colleges. So the group of these guys came to see me, and they said, look, we have developed a little kit which allows us to measure, it's a little cartridge with paper impregnated with antibodies. So you prick a child's finger and put a drop of blood, and the antibodies react by creating a different color for different diseases. And we're tracking 5 diseases: malaria, dengue, HIV, and 1 or 2 others. Now, when the paper changes color, you use an Android phone to photograph, which is what she's doing. So she is photographing a cartridge that is just sitting underneath the little kit. And she sends the SMS or whatever, the picture, through to an app that comes back 5 seconds later and says, this is malaria. So what we've taken a province in Zimbabwe, because we call Zimbabwe our sandbox. So we've taken a whole province, and we've gone to every single clinic where we have coverage. And we have put one of those kits and trained the nurses. And basically, they are now tracking the 5 diseases. And we've created a database for public health for the government. So they can track those diseases real time. I mean, now that the rains have come, you all know malaria has come back. I mean, we are seeing real data every single day coming from these clinics as to how many people have been diagnosed with malaria. Now, this is what we can do with our networks. The cost of one of these kits is less than $100. And what we are now working on is to say, okay, can we roll out, how do you persuade mobile network operators like us, who have costs to deal with? Should we roll out national networks like this? Who's going to pay for it? A donor might want to come in, but how do we make it sustainable? And if you look at the 2 initiatives, the first one stands, what we're doing there stands commercial. I think you'll all agree. But if you look at the disease surveillance network, as well as our work with the cold chain, our view is that, and this is what we are beginning now to discuss with the governments, where we have an ability to roll out these networks, which is to say that this is what should now be paid for under what we call universal service coverage. Because in almost every one of the original licenses in Africa, and I've seen so many of them, there was this concept of universal service. Because they believed that operators would remain in the city and never go out. So they said, okay, we'll take 2% of your revenue, gross revenue, and we will use that money to roll out networks in the rural areas. One, they took the money, they never built anything. And as often happens in business, that old military adage that says that a battle plan is only as good as your first contact with the enemy. I always remind our people that a business plan is only as good as our first contact with the customer. So what happened is the networks went into the rural areas. They actually didn't need an incentive, or the money being deducted from them for the state to build. So this has just become part of the license fee. In fact, very few people know that the license fee is split in 2 parts. There is a universal service obligation. I mean, they used to make us go out and put out payphones. And we would say, we put out 5,000, everybody has a cell phone now. Nobody needs a payphone. Okay, what you can use that money for is to get operators to use their networks to build things like these disease surveillance network and help to establish public health. Finally, I've just got two quick ones for you that I want to quickly touch on, and I'm not going to go through another video slot for you. We've all talked about agriculture. This is really one of my favorite initiatives, which we recently launched. And in our weather indexed program, we developed a little plastic capsule. And we embed the plastic capsule inside a seed pack. As you can see, those are little seed packs, which have got maize, and inside is our little plastic capsule. When the farmer has planted the crop, they must take out the plastic capsule, open it, and they find inside a little piece of paper. And on the paper is an SMS number and a long 9-digit number. So they must give us the long 9-digit number and SMS it to us. That's all they have to do. And the moment the farmer has done that, and we have received that, they now have a weather indexed insurance policy. Because we have now located where the farmer was from our base station. We know what the weather was, what the weather is in that area, because we've put a weather monitoring device at the tower. So we know from our base station that in this area, so many millimeters of rain fell every day, what the wind speed was, what the humidity was. So if the farmer comes forward and says, look, I planted this crop, but there was a drought. And as you know, in this part of the world, all the way up the East Coast, we have problems of droughts. So the farmer can make a claim. And to make the claim, when we activate, we use the same billing engine that we used on this thing. So we deduct 5 cents from the farmer's cell phone account every day for 120 days. So that's the insurance policy they pay. And when they make their claim, we pay out what they would have picked up based on what our experts have said had they been able to harvest that crop. Finally, this is the first time I'm opening this little box to any public, and it's my my latest concept, or rather our latest concept, but I just have the privilege of being the one to share it with you. We've been working on this now for about 2 years. We call this the EcoPad. And on this little EcoPad, we have built a platform to house all the books for university students, college students, primary schools, secondary schools in Africa. So our plan is very simple. The students will be able to go to their university library or wherever their university store. The school is our partner. They get a percentage of the revenue on this. We've been negotiating with the book manufacturers, the publishers. We've got most of the books. Most of the work is actually not on this, but on the books. And in ebook format, we are getting 50% at least reduction on the cost of the books, which we're passing on to the students. So just like your Kindle, you say, I'm a medical student, you enter, you switch it on, you put medical school, University of Stellenbosch, it should have all your books. You go in, you pick year one, you have all the books, you buy your book in ebook format, you surf on the internet as a basic package, and the teachers and the professors should have one. Course material, coursework. Part of our work is also to open the African students to a mass of public educational material that they currently have no access to. Your Khan Academies, your Coursera's, many of these American universities, British universities, are putting their course material out there. Because part of our challenge, and we're starting, by the way, with universities. We're starting next year with 4 countries. We're opening it up as a franchise, so it's a separate business, so other networks can come to us. We're using the same billing format, so the parents will pay about $5 a month for the student to have this. The student, it depends on the operator. Our intention is the student will not pay for it. If you're a university student, the agreement with the universities is you won't get your transcript until you bring it back. So, because again, we're looking at education. As I said earlier, half the population in Africa are in school or should be in school. I say should be in school because 60 million kids around the world are not in school, that are in primary school going age. And of those 60 million, half are in Africa. And of the half, 15 million are in Nigeria. So it's as goeth Nigeria, so goeth Africa. So if you think it's a big problem, well, don't forget that by 2075, Nigeria will be the world's third largest country by population. It will be India, China, Nigeria. So it's not a surprise that they have a big portion of the school-going age. But 400 million kids, education. What an opportunity. Thank you very much.
So that very eloquently drew together pretty much most of the strands we've discussed over the last 2 days. There are a load of questions I could ask, but far more importantly, hopefully there are loads of questions that you want to ask. So I will open the floor up if anyone has any questions or comments that they would like to ask Strive about what he just said.
I'm the lucky one to ask the first question. Hello. I'm Anna Jarrah from Sightsavers, an NGO focused on eye health.
Yes.
So one of the things we do also is working with children with vision impairment who are blind and try and get them to go through primary school and upwards. And one of the great difficulties, of course, is the technology. And learning Braille is very difficult, and getting kind of Braille books, things like that, is very expensive. So does your eHub actually work with, does it have the reading technology? Can the students hear the books?
Yes, they can.
They can, okay.
Yes.
Then I'd be very interested in talking to you about the countries, because that kind of just leapfrogs a whole lot of issues, I think, for disabled children. That's great.
What we want to do is we want to get all mobile network operators to see the opportunity of education. And the platform we are building is so whilst we are starting with 4 countries, I want to see it in every African country. Because if you also think about girls in school, because I'm part of the UN Secretary General's initiative on education for children. It's a disproportionate number of girls are not in school, of the kids that are not in school. The most shocking data is 240 million kids are in school with no material. But we have 700 million, almost, cell phones on the African continent. So it's not even about the tablet itself. As far as I'm concerned, if we can make the platform, even if they have to read it on a cell phone. So it's going to make it a lot easier when we start looking at people with disabilities. But what we also need is for people like you to come forward. Because we're just engineers, So we really need you guys to come forward like these other guys have done and said, could you do this for us? Because you'll be surprised, there's always somebody in an organization like ours. And I know this is the same whether you're at Vodafone or Airtel or MTN. It's only when you say to them, could you do this? And say, oh, yeah, no, I can do that. So we need you to come forward, telling us what you think the issues are. And we need the operators and the way we manage our businesses to push our people to be more broad-minded, because in this is where we're going to find our future. Thank you.
Next question. One over there.
Hi, David Tubman here from GSMA. There's a particular interest in the GSMA at the moment around the role of the data sets that operators have within their systems and the role of big data both in the developed world and the developing world. And we heard from Orange this morning where they've released call records in Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire, to the public industry to analyse and make recommendations around. Is there any interest in Econet to look at the data you have and maybe release it to the public domain?
I have been saying for a number of years now, even on public platforms like this, that we are holding the secrets. And I give the example, I asked this question one day of someone at the World Bank. I said, what do you think the GDP of Zimbabwe is? And he says, well, we say 10 billion. I said, okay, so how come they spend $1 billion on telephone bills? I said, something's going on here. Okay, why don't we do a study on this? Because I believe we now have data in these telephone companies that allow us to actually understand African GDP. Because it's in the informal sector. So it's silly to suggest that a $10 billion economy has people spending $1 billion making phone calls to one another, and there are no riots. So we've got to begin to look at the data. And the way we've got to give to receive. We've got to break down our silos and let this data come out. Because in it is where we're going to understand our own businesses better if we allow academics and others to begin to. We may not be able to study the data, but others can come in, look at this, and tell us what they are seeing. So we just had a team from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation looking at our mobile money platform. And we've said to them, look, we can talk about releasing our data. But we also want others to do the same. But we're not going to say you release first before we release. We know that we are confident that as we release this data, we can only benefit from it. Thank you.
So that serves as a very timely reminder to the other operators in the room that after the session in Terrace 1 room, we're with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation USA to talk about how we can do exactly that. So take the example, I think, and then see how we can do that. More questions or any comments from the room if anyone wants to ask?
Hi, my name is Natalia. I work on mobile agriculture program within GSMA, but my question is not agriculture related. I've noticed that you guys are so focused on bringing benefit to the society, but you mainly look at the social impact, while the environmental effect of your operations is tremendous. And although you look at the solar panels, the solar solutions for the end consumers, you run your stations on diesel. So is there a plan to replace the diesel-generated, diesel-powered base stations with solar? And what are the bottlenecks for you to do it at scale?
Thank you very much. In the mad rush to build these networks, we never stop to think very much about the environment. be honest with you. People went out, they put the diesels in, okay? I'm one of the founders of the Carbon War Room. So if there's, at least when we're shouting at each other with Richard Branson, I say, you're putting it up there and I'm putting it down here, so let's find a solution. But the thing is, that's a business group trying to see how we address some of the challenges created in our own specific industries. We've began work on replacing our diesels. But I must tell you some of the challenges that we have. The solar panels, solar, for you to generate the power, you need a big solar array. So to just replace, to do 7 kilowatts of solar, of power with a solar panel, it's half the size of this room. We don't have sites that big, particularly in urban centers where the majority of these base stations are to be found. So what we are developing, as we begin to do new sites, you can be a little bit more, you can be more creative. With existing sites, we are facing the two challenges, which is we don't have enough land. We've got a roof. We can't do it. So what we're tending to do is look for hybrid solutions around things like batteries to try and increase the battery capacity. Just to the cost of removing a diesel, even once you have silenced it, to return to the site is a crane. It costs you almost as much to get it out of there as it costs you to put it in. We've got tanks, diesel tanks, that we buried in the ground. So there's a lot of issues that the engineers now begin to tell you that, your green fingers are a bit more difficult to achieve. But there is a movement across the industry. People have announced, I've seen many different solutions. We've got about half a dozen different ideas that are swirling around, even fuel cells. Some are talking wind, and we've looked at wind, and it's not that bad. But it's really, there isn't a panacea that I have seen at a time when we are now become more cost conscious that allows us to go back in and resolve this other than to get the grid going. Because if we can get the grids going, that job becomes a lot easier because we are silencing, we can silence the engine. So there's a lot of good work going on, but not enough.
So before we go back to the floor for a question, I'll sneakily get one in myself. You described yourself as effectively the entrepreneur-in-chief. Talked about with the green kiosks how you're giving entrepreneurship training. Mobile will provide the backbone for entrepreneurs to launch new innovative digital businesses. We're not always the easiest people in the world to approach, to try and do partnerships and simple deals with. What can operators do, or what should operators do to try and make sure that they have a platform that entrepreneurs can use and they can innovate on and they can build new businesses on?
Sure. I mean, it requires us to be holistic to begin with. And we talk, for instance, of the jobs if you look at the African street today, okay, kids are selling recharge cards in Dakar, in Lagos, and so forth. Tens of thousands of young people are employed in just that piece. Okay, we are now saying we can move this to our mobile money platforms so that people are buying airtime. But what about the jobs of all these kids? We have to be holistic in thinking, all right, what do we do with these kids that are on the streets selling our product? Can we create new entrepreneurial opportunities for them from our businesses? the biggest opportunity is big data. You know, as I was saying to you earlier, the global data, I was looking at a study from the Rockefeller Foundation recently, and they said that the total amount of data in the world has now reached 2.5 quadrillion bytes of data. It's a lot of zeros. But the real startling thing that I saw in that report was that 90% of it was generated in the last 2 years. So we have a tsunami of data. What does this mean in terms of new business opportunities, both for us and in the processes that we are going to run? I take a deep breath every time I think of that. And I want every young person out there with an app, with an idea as to how we're going to take advantage of this so that we as mobile network operators don't have the Googles eat our lunch.
Okay, so we probably have time for one more question from the floor if we have.
Hi, my name is Amal from the M4D M-Farmer program. One of our key messages to our members when we promote our M-Farmer program is the importance of the rural market and why go after the rural market. When I look at the 3 products you shared with us today, the insurance for crops, solar lanterns, and the off-grid battery charger, it makes you think that these are part of a rural strategy. So if so, can you help us understand how that ties into a rural strategy and why, and if rural is a big part of your overall strategy, or what picture the rural market plays in your overall big strategy?
Thank you very much. I think the most exciting thing about the cell phone industry for me, when we look at the explosion in the cell phone industry worldwide, the innovation that created that industry was not, as you know, it was not telecommunications. It was a billing innovation. It was prepaid. You know, cell phones had been around almost 15 years, but it was an elite product because we needed to know where you lived and how you got, you know. I remember visiting Kinshasa to see the very first African cell phone network. It was set up in 1987. So I needed to go and see this. And as we were driving along the road, they had 1,500 customers. And so I said to the owner of the business, a late gentleman called Miko Waitare, who was one of our pioneers in Africa, I said, Miko, there's a lot of people with cell phones in Kinshasa. How come you told me you've only got 1,500 subscribers? He said, oh, strive. Those guys you are seeing, those are dummies they use to try to their girlfriends. People use, it was such a status symbol to have a phone. People had them made out of wood and would stand on the street corner like this, you know, so that people, okay. But the breakthrough came with prepaid. It made it possible for us to, if you look today, where this industry in Africa, we're down to $3 average revenue per month. We're collecting money from rural people. So and that was the next issue, where we began to say, you know, poverty is not absolute. Yes, you say people live on $2 a day. That's $60 a month. What do they do with the $60? They spend on water. The poor pay for things at greater prices than most of us. And we all know that. They're paying $2 for a cell phone bill. So if they can have that aspiration met, then this is where this industry that's its great success. It could build and get to a point where someone in the rural areas could become our customer. So we from day one, once we picked that up, that the rural people were our customers, we've always integrated it into our thinking. I didn't talk about mobile money, but our mobile money platform in Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe and Burundi, the Zimbabwean mobile money platform in that so-called $10 billion economy, from February to August, we processed 1.2 billion US dollars. When you look at the movement of that money, 80% went into the rural areas. Because these were sons and daughters working in urban centers, sending money through. We're now doing almost 100 US dollars a week in just transfers. So the rural economy is very much part of our future. Because the other thing you've got to look at is Africa is the fastest growing middle class. It will surpass China from the data I have seen by 2035. So they're good business. Thank you.
So I think that's pretty much where we're going to leave it for the moment. So before I say a couple of closing remarks, once again, Mr. Ive, thank you very, very much for closing the time.